Today we are going through Unit 3, Genes and Genetics. This is the biology part of science. Let's go through Lesson 1, the main principles of heredity. We have all noticed the similarities you might have with your brothers and sisters or parents. As you also might see here in these pictures, the similarities between these family members. Genetics explain the similarities between children and parents or brothers and sisters. This is because genetic traits transfer from one generation to another according to laws, and these traits, which are transmitted from one generation to another, are called hereditary traits. However, not all the traits are transmitted from one generation to another. There are some traits which originate as a result of the experience gained from the environment. These traits are called acquired traits. Hereditary traits are those traits which are transmitted from one generation to another, such as hair color, skin color, number of fingers, or the blood groups. Acquired traits are those traits which are not transmitted from one generation to another. Skills of playing football, learning of swimming, speaking in many languages, learning of walking in children. So acquired traits are traits which originate from the environment. Genetics. It is a science that researches the transmission of the hereditary traits from one generation to another by studying the similarities and differences between the parents and offsprings. Gregor Mendel is the responsible scientist for the laws of inheritance of traits, because the scientific studies of heredity started with Mendel's experiment on pea plant, and according to the results reached by Mendel, scientists of heredity have gathered a lot of information about how the hereditary traits are transmitted from one generation to another. Why did Mendel choose a pea plant? Mendel chose a pea plant because it is easy to be planted and it grows fast. Its life cycle is short. Its flowers are hermaphrodite, so it can be self-pollinated. It can be easily artificially pollinated through human intervention. It produces large number of plants in a generation. It has several pairs of easily recognized contrasting traits. What did Mendel do? Mendel chose a pea plant that produces yellow seeds and another pea plant that produces green seeds. Then he made self-pollination for these plants for several generations to be sure of the purity of this trait. Mendel observed that plants that have yellow seeds produce plants with yellow seeds, a generation after generation. And also the plants that have green seeds produce plants with green seeds. What did Mendel make was cross-pollination. He removed anthers from the flower which produces yellow seeds. Now we have a flower without anthers. Then transferred pollen grains from the anthers of the plant that produce green seeds to the stigma of the plant flower which produces yellow seeds. Mendel observed that all the produced plants, which he named them the first generation, have yellow seeds at a rate of 100%, and the green-colored seed trait disappeared completely in the individuals of the first generation. We can summarize the previous Mendel's experiment in the following figure. Parents: 100% plants with pure green seeds, 100% plants with pure yellow seeds. They go through cross-pollination, and then all the produced plants of the first generation have 100% yellow seeds. So Mendel called the yellow color of the seed a dominant trait because it's dominating green color, while the green color was called a recessive trait. On second generation, the produced plants are 75% with yellow seeds and 25% with green seeds. Mendel named the dominance of the dominant trait on the recessive trait in the first generation with the term the principle of complete dominance. So the principle of complete dominance is the appearance of a dominant hereditary trait in the individuals of the first generation when two individuals are crossed. One of them carries a pure trait contrasting the trait carried by the other individual. On the following table shows the dominant traits and recessive traits of pea plant which Mendel studied. So here is given the trait, flower color, flower position, seed color, seed shape, stem height, pod fruit color, and pod fruit shape. So dominant trait on the color was red color, and recessive trait was white color. Flower position was the dominant trait was on the side, the flower position, and the recessive trait of the flower position was in the end. I'm going to leave this table a little bit longer so you can see by yourself the dominant traits and recessive traits of pea plant which Mendel studied. Okay, let's carry on with the Mendel's assumption of the experiment. So, the Mendel's assumption of the experiment are: the hereditary traits are transmitted from the parents to the offspring by means of hereditary factors carried by gametes, pollen grains, and ovules in plants. What means gametes? Gametes are the cells by which the hereditary traits are transmitted from parents to offspring. Each hereditary trait is controlled by two hereditary factors, one from the father and the other from the mother. The two hereditary factors of each trait separate when the gametes are formed. During fertilization process, the two hereditary factors aggregate again, if the two factors are similar or homozygous. The result which we get is dominant factor plus dominant factor is going to give a pure dominant trait. How to understand this? If I'll have the aggregation of two different plants. The first plant has a dominant factor, so it has yellow seed. The second plant also, it has a yellow seed. So they are two dominant factors, yellow seed plus yellow seed, they will give another plant with yellow seed. Recessive factor plus recessive factor is going to give pure recessive trait. Means what? If I will have the aggregation of two different plants with recessive factor, means if their seeds are green, because we said that green color is the recessive factor. So the recessive factor, the green color of the first plant, is joining with the green seed of the second plant, two recessive factors, because the green color again is recessive. So green color of the green color seed of the first plant plus green color seed of the second plant, they are going to give a new plant. Pure recessive trait means another plant with green seed. But however, it can happen even the aggregation between two different factors or heterozygous. In this case, if there is the aggregation of a dominant factor plus a recessive factor, the result is going to be in pure dominant trait. Means if I have the aggregation of two different plants, the first plant is dominant factor, means the first plant, it will have a seed in a yellow color. The second plant is recessive factor, means the second plant is a plant with seed in green color. So if I have two different plants, one with a red with green color and the other one with yellow color, the new plant is going to be with yellow seed, because the result is in pure dominant trait. However, all what Mendel said, he summarized them on his law of segregation of factors, or how we call it, Mendel's first law. When two pure individuals of any one pair of hereditary traits are different from each other, only the dominant trait appears in the first generation, while the two traits appear in the second generation at a ratio of 3 dominant trait and 1 recessive trait. And this is all for this time. Thank you for watching.